Hey, Dr. Scott Bolland here, and welcome to Leading in 10, the live stream where we hope to help you amplify your impact in leading yourself and others in only 10 minutes. In today's episode, I'm joined by Dr. Kailas Roberts in taking a look at how to optimize your lifestyle to boost your brain performance. Dr. Roberts is a psychiatrist, dementia expert, and author of Mind Your Brain, the essential Australian guide to dementia. He's the creator of BrainScan, a phone app that allows users to know and address their risk factors for poor brain health and dementia. He's also the founder of Your Brain in Mind, Cognitive Optimization Clinic. Thank you so much for joining us.
Very much, Scott.
So when we talk about boosting brain performance, what do we actually mean by brain performance?
Yes, well, I mean, it's a good and rather broad question. I suppose when we're looking at kind of optimal brain performance, it's quite a sort of wide ranging topic, but ultimately, I guess if you've got an optimally performing brain, you have the ability to adapt effectively to your sort of intellectual, social and physical environment. And, so that's, I guess, what I see brain performance as being about. Whatever the context is, you can deal with it.
Yeah, of course. So I guess for a leadership group or audience, what would you say the benefits are for optimizing this in both the short term and long term?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm very interested in the long-term side of it. So I think that is very relevant. And I've actually increasingly seen a lot of clients who in their sort of 50s and 60s who are generally pretty good, but, they're in high-level positions in companies and they're just worried that their performance has kind of dipped a little bit because of the age-related changes, or because, we do start to see beginnings of some issues that can sort of impact function around about that time. So, within the corporate sector, obviously you're dealing with kind of high performing individuals who need to kind of be at the top of their game. And really, if their brains are not performing and it's their brains the thing that's kind of got them to where they are, then that's a problem.
So the other question related to that is, what are the key evidence-based approaches for improving brain performance? I'm sure you have a list here. And if we go through that, explain a little bit about what they are and how they work.
Yeah.
Shall we bring up that slide?
This, I guess, covers the sort of the basics of what I see as the relevant and evidence-based kind of interventions for optimal brain health. So you can see there's quite a number there, and it's probably not exhaustive, of course, and they're sort of broad categories. But all of these things are going to impact your, I guess, performance now and also your performance into the future. Going through those, I mean, very briefly, so the be happy and content, easier said than done, of course, but, there's certainly a link between chronic stress and anxiety, which affects all of us, and including people in the kind of corporate sector who have high stress jobs a lot of the time. And unfortunately, there is a link between that and, both impacted cognitive performance now, but also dementia risk and things like that going forward. Similarly, there's kind of issues with depression as well. So if you have enduring, severe depression or enduring chronic stress that's severe, both of those things probably through some sort of inflammatory condition and also even morphological changes in the brain can predispose you to sort of dementia. So doing what you can to sort of essentially manage your mental health is really important for your cognitive health as well. The two are very kind of intimately connected.
What's the mechanism there in terms of stress and the way it actually impacts the brain and cognitive function?
Yeah, I think the main theory behind that is really that it's a kind of an inflammation related issue. So high levels of stress chronically, and then you get sort of cortisol release, cytokine release and things. And then we know that there's this connection between chronic systemic inflammation and also neuroinflammation. But we also know that for instance, in people depressed, their hippocampi, which are the memory centers of the brain, are actually smaller than somebody who doesn't have depression. And then you treat the depression and the hippocampal volume increases again. And we know that issues with your hippocampus are again, a hallmark feature of Alzheimer's and things like that.
And that be happy is an interesting one because it's, how do you suddenly be happy? What's your strategy around that?
Well, I wish I could tell you. Yeah, look, it's a very complex topic, isn't it? I mean, there's all sorts of stuff about trying to get, the right work-life balance. And, there's There's benefits to some of the interventions like mindfulness, meditation, which interestingly actually has also a positive effect on attention, one of the cognitive functions as well. But
Yeah.
yeah, being happy. I mean, I'd love to be happy all the time, but there's no,
But
uh,
I think just, yeah, just looking at some of these factors, they're not orthogonal. So, for example, we know that one of the greatest correlates of happiness is warm relationships,
yeah,
and you have that listed there. So they kind of, this is a not orthogonal list. They're all kind of interrelated in some sense, but it's sort of spelling it out. So, yeah, it's
that's
interesting.
quite right. And again, I mean, it's interesting that I think there are certain common pathways with a lot of these different factors. So coming back to that sort of inflammatory component again. So with the loneliness, feelings of isolation, again, we can track the CRP, one of the markers of inflammation in people's blood. And we
Yeah,
know that it's chronically raised in people that feel lonely. So again, there's that sort of inflammation link. So they are all entwined to a degree.
yeah,
Yeah.
and sleep you have as the next one.
Yeah. Sleep. I mean, sleep's really interesting. I love talking about sleep. I personally struggle with it, so it's kind of, I have this sort of interest in it, but, so vital. And,
Mm,
obviously a cliche that why would you spend a third of your life in this really vulnerable position unless it's really, very important for you? And it's so true, just not from just the general physical and mental health perspective, but also cognitively. And I guess
yeah,
the two main things cognitively are one, the consolidation of memory. And then there's another really interesting element, which is probably more of a long-term thing where during your periods of deep sleep, you're actually washing your brain of these toxic, essentially metabolites.
yeah. I remember going to a seminar years and years and years ago about this, and they said in some of the studies that they were looking at was depriving rats of sleep. And you have all these free radicals, and the free radicals sort of puncture, holes in all of these structures in the brain. And if you deprive a rat of sleep for a week, you open up its brain as basically mush from the lack of sleep. Does that make sense? Does that resonate?
That does make sense. And of course, in rat studies and things like that, I mean, they do die, if you sleep deprive them for long enough.
Yeah.
Mm.
The next you have activating your body.
And so really it's about physical exercise, which I'm sure everybody's quite aware of the general benefits of physical exercise.
Yeah.
But me, it is probably the key intervention. Again, coming back to the hippocampus, there's some suggestion exercise improves hippocampal volume. We know that there is benefits for the prefrontal cortex, which is involved in executive function as well. So exercise is really critical. We know about BDNF release with exercise. So this is
Mhm.
this probably aware of it. This neurotrophin, fertilize the brain essentially, which is critical.
Yeah.
I think maybe one thing with exercise that people are a little bit less aware of is it's really not just about the kind of aerobic stuff. I mean, that's really important, but resistance training is also very important,
Okay.
probably slightly different mechanisms,
Yeah.
including the fact that if you have bigger muscles, your muscles actually act as a glucose sink. So you can
Mhm.
pull blood out of your sugary foods from your bloodstream into your muscles, and you reduce the chance of getting metabolic disease, insulin resistance, and all of these other things that also damage the brain. So
Mhm.
I would recommend, 5 times a week, decent, moderate amounts of aerobic exercise, and then at least a couple of times a week resistance exercise, and then some high intensity as well, because that seems to, through a thing called the kind of lactate shuttle, essentially, seems to have its own specific benefits. So if you can kind of do all those three things, then I think that's so helpful for your brain.
And exercise is one of those things that's quite maintainable by most people. It's releases endorphins and can make you happy, so it's actually motivational to actually do it. But I think there's another link there to the hippocampus as well. And as you have neurogenesis occurring, which is the formation of new brain cells, and that's actually part of the hippocampal process in forming these short-term memories. Is that neuronal growth? And you
Yeah.
need a certain amount of oxygen to be able to do that. And if you're not exercising, that neurogenesis actually switches off in the brain. And so that
Yeah.
actually impacts your memory. So having that exercise, oxygen basically turns on the neurogenesis. Again, that's from my memory, whether or not that's correct or
No, no, that definitely is.
So vascular health.
Yeah, vascular health. So that, essentially is really about things that I'm sure most of your kind of viewers would know about, things like blood pressure, cholesterol, blood sugar, just making sure that that's all okay.
Nurturing friendships. And
Yeah.
fine.
So yeah, I mean, that comes back to the socialization, I suppose. So we obviously know that socialization guards against things like depression and anxiety and stress and things like that. So that's really important.
And they say the impact of warm relationships or loneliness is the same size impact as smoking 15 cigarettes a day on health. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a worry, isn't it? I think in this era of damaged social relationships, for whatever reason, technology, of course, being a chief suspect and things. Yeah.
So what about the scan elements here?
Scan. So the say what correct hearing loss, and that's fairly obvious. Interestingly, in the Lancet, which is a fairly reputable medical journal, a few years ago, they looked at if you could address all the modifiable risk factors for dementia,
Mhm.
how many cases would you be able to delay or prevent, and it was close to a half, so about 40%. And when they uh, dug into that more deeply, the thing that was what you get most bang for your buck at population level was correcting hearing. So
Yeah.
8% of, what we call population attributable risk was actually due to poor hearing. So if
Interesting.
you could do one thing to a population, it would be improve their hearing, to guard against dementia risk.
Yeah, wow.
So hearing, we've talked about the interconnectedness of all of this. Obviously, if you don't hear, you can't socialize very well. It might lead to social isolation and loneliness and all of those kind of things.
Next, complex mental activity.
Yeah, so it's a bit of an amorphous term. It's an official term, but I'll try to find out exactly what they mean by that.
Yeah.
It's difficult to get it, but it's my take on that really is that your brain is, it's a neuroplastic organ. It's going to
Yep.
adapt to its inputs, and if you are essentially exercising your brain, then it's going to sort of benefit from that.
And next to alcohol.
Yes. Yeah, alcohol awareness. So, unfortunately, there's a bit of a myth about alcohol, which we're now realizing, this kind of idea that a little bit is better than none, turns out it's probably not true. It's a shame. So, we are better off in general, kind of not drinking, aside from the benefits. It's like disappointing. There you go.
Nourishing food. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so nourishing food. I mean, diet is such a controversial topic, but essentially, when we're looking at brain health, I still think that the most evidence-based kind of diets are really the Mediterranean diet and this thing called the MIND diet, which is sort of a complicated acronym for the modified Mediterranean diet with vascular risk factors. That both of those things have reasonable evidence of a positive impact on brain health.
I was aiming for 10 minutes. We've gone for 34, but just such an interesting topic. So thank you so much for joining us. Any final reflections or thoughts before we head off?
Well, really, I mean, I think I would just really encourage everybody just to bear in mind, it's not just about how you are now, it's about how your brain's going to be in 15 or 20 years. And stuff happens from quite an early age to your brain,
Mm.
so you really need to be kind of mindful of all of that. And it can be a kind of tough gig to kind of do all the right things over a long stretch of time. But I think if you kind of just chip away at it and you're aware of it, I think you're going to be a lot better off in the longer term.
No, perfect. So if people want to contact you for speaking arrangements or consulting, where can they find you? I've got braininmind.com.au. Is that the best contact or?
But that's a reasonable contact. Probably through my LinkedIn profile would be the best way to get hold of me.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks very much, Scott. Good pleasure.
Cheers.